welcome to this edition of The Guys, your place for fantasy football analysis and expertise. I'm your host, the Fantasy Doctor. With me as always, The Guys. To my right, Big Red, Mr. Mark Down.
Welcome to the smart side of the panel.
To his right, these guys are going to argue with that. To his right, the smartest man in the panel, the professor, Mr. Ryan Nault.
Welcome back, everybody.
To my left, the angriest man on the panel, a man who paints in fantasy anger, the artiste, Mr. Jay Greenwald.
Cheers, and Big Red, you ignorant slut.
And to his left, Canadian Bacon, Mr. Carl Marchand.
Hey guys, opening night NHL season, and we'll still be better on this side.
Love it. And joining us this week as our refreshment connoisseur, Miss Holly LaRouche.
Hello.
Guys, let's roll. Holly, what's first?
Studs of the week.
Studs of the week. Sounds so much better when she says it. I'm going to kick it down to you, Professor. Start us off. Studs of the week.
I was looking at T.Y. Hilton, and the reason I'm looking at him, there's some other guys that had some great numbers last week, but T.Y. Hilton, he had 11 targets, but he caught 10 of them, and I think that's very huge. There's a lot of receivers get a lot of targets, and they don't do anything with them. He had 10 receptions, 171 yards, and a touchdown. I think moving forward, I do like what Indianapolis is doing, and I think you're going to see more of that down the road.
Yeah, T.Y. Hilton back on track, and you're right, making the most of the opportunities. We talk so much on the show about touches as a running back and then targets as a receiver. You get 11 targets, you snag 10. I can't disagree. Big Red, you're up. Stud of the week.
Yeah, I'm going to go with Sammy Coates, the other guy in Pittsburgh. He's seeing the weak coverage. Antonio Brown is a world beater. I mean, he's going to beat whatever coverage you roll at him. But Sammy Coates is kind of picking up as that Martavius Bryant role. Apparently, he was the one feeding Martavius the weed because Sammy Coates wanted some playing time. 11 targets, caught 6 of them, 139 and 2 touchdowns. Big Ben's throwing it deep to this guy, and he's going to catch a lot of those balls this year.
Well, somebody's got to provide the weed, particularly when you have Le'Veon Bell on the same team. Yeah. Artiste, your stud of the week.
I got to go with Marcus Mariota. He was amazing last week. I mean, he had 3 passing touchdowns. He didn't throw for that much yardage. It was like 170 yards, but he had 3 passing touchdowns. He rushed for 1. He had 60 yards rushing. He was amazing last week, and and I understand a lot of people didn't probably have him in there, but if you needed a fill-in, he was phenomenal last week.
Yeah, Mariota's coming along for sure, and looking forward, he's got some really good matchups. The next 3 weeks are going to be really good for Mariota. Let's go down to you, Canadian Bacon. Give me your Baconator of the week.
And I'll say it, and I think this side of the panel had him at a start last week. Wasn't me, but my friend here to my right. Jordan Howard, 16 rushes, 171 yards, and a TD. Chicago's terrible, but this guy's putting up huge numbers early in the season.
Yeah, I mean, what a step up from Langford. All of a sudden, they look formidable with Howard as their back. I like them going forward, and I love Howard going forward. And the great thing about Howard is we talked about him on the show. Great waiver wire pickup if you have him on your team. Guys, let's do a real quick hitter. C.J. Anderson, we talked about him in the show all season. Everybody's been really excited about C.J. However, Booker last week had 10 touches to C.J. Anderson's 14 touches. 14 carries, 62 yards for C.J. Anderson. 10 carries, 59 yards for Booker. So I want to go down the row, and I'll start on this side. Canadian Bacon, if you're a C.J. Anderson owner, are you concerned?
Yes, and I think later on when we get to waiver wire targets, you might know why.
Artiste.
I think you have to be concerned a little bit, but I think he'll pull back out of those a little bit of a funk. Big Red touted him earlier in the year, and I believe in that. I mean, I made a joke earlier. Big Red, you ignorant slut, but I don't feel that way. I mean, I think he's a slut, but I don't think he's ignorant. So I think that I think he's going to come back.
A huge distinction there.
Yes, there is, and I think CJ will come back. And I believe in Big Red. So.
Big Red, you're up. C.J. Anderson, you've been a champion of this guy since day one. Booker scares you?
He does, and he should. He's a guy you absolutely must handcuff, C.J. Anderson. Last year, C.J. Anderson got hurt, and Hillman looked like, he looked like a stud last year. And you saw what Hillman did this year, absolutely nothing. What concerns me more about C.J. Anderson is that their tackles are hurt, Virgil Green's banged up, and Simeon's not playing very well. So The lanes aren't there. They have a great schedule, though, so I still think he's going to be the man.
Yeah, no team in the NFL has given up more receiving yards and receptions to running backs than San Diego. If he doesn't get it done this game, and particularly if Booker vultures some of those carries and some of those touches, I have a hard time believing in C.J. Anderson the rest of the year. Let's hear from you, artiste. C.J. Anderson, you scared?
Man, he's already calling you artiste.
I'm sorry, Professor.
1 week.
Professor, are you scared? C.J. Anderson.
I certainly am. I mean, you drafted the guy high. You were expecting him to get all the carries for the most part. Now he's going to start giving some of them up to Booker, so I'm certainly concerned.
Yeah, I think C.J. Anderson going forward. I think the game that he has against San Diego is going to be very telling. Again, San Diego incredibly bad against the receiving yards and the rushing yards against running backs. Holly, I'm glad you're on set.
Yes.
We're up. What's next?
Toilet bowl.
Toilet bowl, guys. Duds of the week. I'm going to kick it down to you, Canadian Bacon. Who's your excrement of week 5?
I think I ended last week saying, hey, I did a little dance. Tom Brady. Come on. 406, only 3 TDs against Cleveland? Okay, no, seriously, though. Lamar Miller, the guy I told you to sit last week. Lamar Miller.
Canadian humor, guys. That's what you're going to get.
I'm sorry.
That's-
I'll apologize. I'm Canadian. I'm sorry.
That's what
I'm
you're
sorry.
He has hockey on the break.
Lamar Miller, 11 targets, 24 yards. Told you to put him in your bench. It panned out. Minnesota is absolutely legit on defense. I think moving forward, you have to seriously consider starting or sitting guys against Minnesota, regardless of what their name is. That team shuts down everybody.
Yeah, they're a monster on defense. The big reason that they're undefeated, even with Sam Bradford at quarterback. I agree. Let's kick it to you, Artiste. Your flush of the week.
I guess it would have to be Zach Ertz. I have to admit up to my mistakes. I sat here last week and told you that Zach Ertz was going to score like 75 touchdowns against the Lions. And I don't think he got over 60.
I think it was 78, actually.
Was it 7? Okay.
But I'm sure you had
Okay.
good reasons on why
No,
to
I
start
did.
Ertz.
Well, I
so.
did. I mean, listen, the matchup was phenomenal. The Lions give up, and it will probably happen again this week. Lions give up 1 million points to tight ends. Zach Ertz is a pretty good tight end, and this is a Philadelphia team that had been rolling. If they were playing the Lions again this Sunday, I would make the exact same pick. However, I made it last week and I was wrong, so I have to admit up to it, and it was bad. So.
Yeah, well, but we see
that
what you did
respect.
there. Actually, the Lions and Atlanta tied for giving up the most receiving touchdowns this year with 14. You can feel pretty good about starting any receiver against these two teams. Atlanta, Detroit not doing so well. They didn't get a win last week.
Right.
But Atlanta doing very well, although they've given up 14 receiving touchdowns, tied for Detroit as worst. Big Red, you're up. Who you flushing?
Yeah, Eli Manning was top of my quarterback list last week. Green Bay defense, we had even talked about this, absolutely atrocious against the pass. He goes 18 of 35 for less than 200 yards and a single touchdown, and even that was a garbage time pass to Odell Beckham. I think this is where you start to worry and say, man, is this offense, even with those weapons, can he get it done? If you can't get it done against Green Bay, you're going to be struggling against some pretty decent defenses that's coming up for him.
Yeah, Green Bay definitely not scary. Very scary against the run, not scary against the pass. I agree. Should have been a much better start. Professor, finish this up. Who you flushing?
Jarek McKinnon. A lot of people picked him up on the waiver wire when Peterson went down. He's getting all the touches. I think he had 20 touches last week. He gained 38 yards. You want touches. Those are great. But you cannot love a guy that's going to be doing something 38 yards on 20 touches.
Yeah, it was brutal. And I was one of the guys that was really excited about Jarek McKinnon prior to the season. Looked great in preseason. I thought there was a chance with Adrian Peterson being like 700 years old that Jarek McKinnon might be running back by committee, get touches no matter what. AP goes down, McKinnon gets the job. Everybody's really excited. If you picked him up on a waiver wire, you were really excited. And then the guy's just been an absolute dud. I don't know what's going on with Jarek McKinnon, but you're right. I want to flush him as well. Guys, let's do another quick hitter. And I'm going to start with you, Professor. Let's go right back to you. This is probably Dak Prescott's last week. I mean, he gets a great matchup, but this is it. He plays Green Bay. Green Bay is, I just stated, amazing against the run, terrible against the pass. He gets Des Bryant back. This might be the last audition for Dak Prescott this season. Romo's due back next week. So I want to hear, and I'm going to start with you, Professor. Do you start Romo or do you stay with Prescott?
That's a great question. I mean, I really like what Dak Prescott's doing. I do. But Romo, you don't lose your job to injury, so I guess you got to roll with Romo.
I'm glad you thought it was a good question. Holly writes these for me, actually. So all kudos to Holly for the Romo versus Prescott question. I have to give her credit. Big Red, you're up.
Yeah, Dak Prescott's actually doing what we thought Romo was going to do in the preseason. Fantastic line defense. It's not very good in a fantastic run game. I think Romo is now a fantastic pickup because I think he's actually going to be better than Prescott down the stretch.
Yeah, their offense looks pretty good. I mean, Elliott seems to be stretching the defenses. They still are able to throw the ball with Dak Prescott. I think Romo's a huge step forward as well. But I want to hear from the rest of the panel. Artiste, Prescott or Romo?
Well, I'm not sure that I'm not really sure that Romo is the answer, that they should move on to Romo at this point. But I think that's what's going to happen because Jerry Jones runs this team. Everybody knows that. It's pretty, and I think that I think him and Roma may have a little bit of a sexual relationship.
Yeah, I think there might be a love child.
Right,
somewhere
there's possibly
out
a
there.
love child, and I think Mo's got a good point with a love child. And I think it doesn't really matter. I don't know what really would matter what Dak Prescott has done. I think it's going to go back to Tony Romo because Jerry Jones, again, he runs his team. I think he's like the coach's little puppet, and Jerry Jones just kind of pulls the strings.
Well, Romo does sell jerseys. I mean, there's no question.
True.
The country, you love or hate Dallas, but they sell jerseys, and Romo sells jerseys. I do think it's interesting what you just said. When Tony Romo came to the Cowboys, I think that was just about the time that Jerry Jones got all that plastic surgery. So maybe it really was looking young for his young stud. I don't know. Canadian Bacon, finish us up.
First-
Romo or Prescott?
First, I'm going to go back to what Professor said, and Drew Bledsoe would love to not have lost his job to injury. Because Tom Brady, seriously, would not have a career if he did not lose a job to injury. So, Dak Prescott should be the starter. I don't care what happens in Dallas, but Dak Prescott should be the starter. If it's me, I'm taking Dax all day long.
It's funny with Canadian Bacon, everything comes back to Brady. I think there might be a little man crush there as well.
There is, and I'll admit it. There is, and I'll admit
In
it.
every segment, when I ask Canadian Bacon something, he's going to somehow work in Brady. But that's okay. Holly, we're moving on. What's next, baby?
Starts and sits.
Starts and sits of the week. You know what? I'm going to mix it up a little bit. Big Red, let's start with you. Who you starting, who you sitting this week? Week 6.
Yeah, I mean, when you're looking at, to me, my guy, I'm going to say it, and I'm going to say it until it's right. I'm going with Stafford. He's a guy that's kind of that borderline quarterback 1, quarterback 2. LA is down their best cornerback. You've got them at home. They're coming off a huge win against the Phillies team that hadn't given up a passing touchdown, was undefeated. And I think this is where Detroit starts rolling. LA is going to have to pound the ball with Gurley. They haven't been able to do it. I think Detroit's going to actually be able to put a little pressure on. Golden Tate, the dressmaker, seems to be figuring it out. If he even gets a little bit of production out of Brown or the tight end at all, this is a guy who's probably going to throw 275, 2, maybe 3 touchdowns, and he's going to win you a couple leagues this week.
Okay, Matt Stafford. Mama says he'd like a box of chocolate. All right, that's my bad, Forrest Gump. You know what? This show pays 0. When it starts to pay, I'll get better accents. Matt Stafford is the epitome of box of chocolates. Week to week, you don't know what you're gonna get, but okay, we're gonna roll with that. Your sit of the week, though. Let's do both.
Yeah, when you're kind of looking at guys that you're wanting to sit, I think this week is you're probably gonna sit Andrew Luck. He's a guy that you drafted as your quarterback number 1. He's been suspect, but if it wasn't for the fourth quarter last week, he'd have had a dud last week too. So this week I'm looking at it, I mean, it's just time to sit him.
Let's move on to you, Professor. Your starts and sits of the week.
I like Kelvin Benjamin to kind of bounce back. He gets to play against the New Orleans defense, which I don't think anybody here on the panel is worried about. I believe he's getting Cam Newton back. I think you're going to see a good 100-yard, 1 or 2 touchdowns out of him. Very excited to see what he can do. As far as sits, Joe Flacco. They just fired their offensive coordinator, Mark Trestman. They're bringing in Marty Morningwig, who actually I do like as an offensive coordinator, but you're still switching it up. And Joe Flacco, he's never been known as a road warrior, and he has to go in and face the G-men and their defense.
The G-men. Let's kick it down to you, Canadian Bacon. Start sits.
My start of the week is actually, and I'll go opposite because I have no faith in Stafford. I'll go to Brian Hoyer. Last week, almost 400 yards passing, hasn't thrown a pick in almost 140 passing attempts. Crazy numbers right now. I think playing against a terrible Tennessee team, probably 250, 2 TDs off the waiver wire. If you need a plug and chug on a bye week or a guy injured, you can't go wrong with Brian Hoyer.
Yeah, Hoyer, I think, has surprised a lot of us. I've been shocked at Hoyer's play. Very competent and starting to put up some fantasy numbers. Let's kick it to you. Finish this up. Artiste.
You want my sit or no?
Oh, I'm sorry. Canadian Bacon was, I was waiting for the humor, and then I got that, so I was moving up. No, give me the seats.
Hey, I'm going to go Brandon Marshall. Against Arizona's defense, that team, if anything, they can defend the pass. Ryan Fitzpatrick's been a mess. Brandon Marshall's the number one target there, but I just think the Jets' offense looks terrible. Brandon Marshall's going to be one of those guys who just has a down week.
And CD, I apologize. You just paused for so long. I thought you were done. Artiste, go ahead, start and sit, and I'll wait until you finish both.
Well, I'm gonna do a little bit of a multiple on the first one if I could for the starts. I'm gonna say Carson Palmer and John Brown. I look at these guys and I think, and I'm a little bit skeptical when it comes to Carson Palmer. And I think you remember from last week, I said some things about him, not overly impressed, but I think he's due. Obviously, he's got some ability. They have a phenomenal matchup against a horrible New York Jets secondary right now.
Yeah, the Jets giving up the second most net yards per pass at 8.1. Absolutely brutal against the pass. So
exactly, and I like a team on Monday night. Arizona, they still need a win. They need to keep bouncing back here. And I'll tell you what, John Brown is getting the targets. So I think he's going to be fine. I think he's going to have a big week. I think they're both going to have a big week this week. I really do.
And he is their deep threat. I mean,
he is. He's got a ton of
Fitz
speed.
Being 202 years old, it's hard for him to get behind defense. Fitz still having an amazing year, but John Brown is definitely the deep threat there. Getting Palmer back, I think, is a huge boost. Your sit of the week.
This is going to be, people are going to probably think I'm crazy here because I'm going to say T.Y. Hilton. I like the guy. He's been phenomenal the last couple of weeks, but I feel like this is also somebody who tends to have a couple of big weeks and maybe take one or two off for whatever reason. But that just seems to be kind of his pattern. And they're playing against a Houston D who's pretty damn good. I believe they're in the top 5 in against the rush and against the pass. And so I think it's just one of those, and I may be, believing in a little bit of the up-down theory right now, but I just think he's going to have a down week this week.
Taking weeks off, that reminds me of Randy Moss back in the day where he would literally not run routes and he got away with it. Guys, we're going to go to a quick hitter. And I'll start back with you, Canadian Bacon. Aaron Rodgers, last 16 games, absolutely pedestrian. Some of those games less than pedestrian. Is he still in GOAT discussion?
Still? I don't know if he ever was. I'll be honest. I don't think that he was, so I'll say no.
Okay. I believe Aaron Rodgers was in the GOAT discussion among many analysts, but Canadian Bacon says he never was, so not for him. Canadian Bacon says no. On you.
I mean, at this point, just the way things have gone lately, I'm going to have to say no. I mean, the guy's amazing, but he's just, right now, he can't be put quite up to that level.
On to you, Big Red.
Yeah, and I'm going to spin it a little bit. I think Brady is in the GOAT discussion because of Belichick. I think Rodgers is not in the GOAT discussion, not because of his own actions, but that coach is awful. It's the play calling. They've decided that we're not going to do what's made it successful in 2013 and 2014. We're going to go back to what made us suck in 2015. Rodgers was fantastic when they fed the ball to the running backs and threw it over the top. They don't have a possession receiver. You cannot throw it on every down. Aaron Rodgers is completely lost because they got away from what made him fantastic. The coach has got to get it right.
Professor, finish this up.
I'm going to have to agree and say no. I mean, when you look at the GOAT, you look at the total body of work, and this lull right here kind of takes him out of the discussion. Can he rebound? Sure, he can. He's a talented quarterback, but right now he's not even close.
I agree with that. I think the last 16 games have taken him a little bit out of the discussion as well. I do remember, regardless of Canadian Bacon not ever putting him in this discussion, Stephen A. Smith and a lot of the other analysts the last couple of years, Aaron Rodgers being called the #1 QB of all time. I think this last 16-game stretch, unless he rebounds huge, and I mean we need another championship and back to that 100 QBR rating every week going forward, I think he's kind of knocked himself out of that chance at that legacy. Holly, what's next?
Waiver targets.
She does do that well. See, that's why I don't announce it, and Holly does. She says it much saucier than I ever would. Canadian Bacon, start with you. Waiver targets.
Yep. Actually, two guys that we talked about earlier. A lot of it, one with the C.J. Anderson topic, was Devontae Booker. Available in a lot of leagues. He's taking a significant amount of targets away from C.J. Anderson right now. I think if you can grab him and play him as a flex, that's a great option for you. The other one I think was at my quarterback position, Brian Hoyer. Available in a ton of leagues. 400 yards last week. We touched on him earlier. Those two guys out there, if you're looking for a plug and chug, bye weeks, injuries, those two guys can't go wrong.
Yeah, Hoyer really coming on, and you're right. He's available in all kinds of leagues. Great point, CB. Let's kick it to you, Artis.
I'd just like to talk a little bit more about Hoyer. I'm just going to give you 2 or 3 quick names and be brief about them. I'm totally with CB down here on that because Hoyer, the last 3 games, he's had 300 yards, and now he's starting against a Jacksonville team that does not defend. It's that simple. So that's a great one. I agree with that a lot. John Brown, I mentioned earlier. Here's a guy that's, I believe, available in a lot of leagues. And I really think he's going to have a breakout week. I think Arizona's going to have a big week. And the other name I like to just throw out there is Cameron Meredith from Chicago. He's getting targeted like crazy. His position when White was there before he got hurt, that position was getting targeted more than Elshon Jeffrey, and it still is. And he had a monster week last week, and I think he's going to have a big week again. And I like him as well.
Yeah, Cameron Meredith, he's one of those people that a lot of people aren't looking at yet. He had a great game last week. He's set up for another good game this week. The guy gets a ton of targets. I mean, we always talk about targets. Cameron Meredith is getting the targets there. Yep. I'm very, and that's all of a sudden, I started to like Chicago. I mean, this is a team, all of a sudden Howard is a fantasy stud, you have Meredith coming on, getting way more targets than Elshon Jeffrey. Looks like he's getting deep, getting behind defenses, playing hard, and Hoyer loves him.
Yeah.
So yeah, I like both of those. Let's kick it down to you, Big Red.
Yeah, much like when we go to the bar, sometimes you got to leave the pretty girl alone and start running with her friends. Okay, so I think it's time to start looking for the handcuffs. I mean, Derrick Henry, we've got Ken Dixon, Booker, CB, fantastic on that. Alfred Morris and James Starks. These are guys that would be absolute running back ones if the guy in front of them goes down. If you're sitting at 5-0, 4-1, even 3-2, I think now's the time. You may not want to use your waiver wire pick, but pick these guys up as a free agent option and look at that's the way to go.
Kicking it down to you, Professor.
I would, if he's still available, I like James White. With Tom Brady back in the offense, they're going to score points. I think we all agree with that. But what James White, what he does is he gives Tom Brady that safety blanket. When they're blitzing him, he can throw it out to White. When they're doing that hurry up offense, I just think he's a real asset if you can pick him up. And another guy and he may or may not be available is Devontae Adams. I know typically you got your Jordy Nelson, you've got Randall Cobb. Cobb's out. He could be out longer than expected. And Devontae Adams, he's scored in 3 of his 4 games that he's played. So if you can get him, throw him on your bench, and you might even have to play him as a bye week until Cobb comes back.
Yeah, it's good to get those guys that are up and coming, maybe haven't blown up yet. Those are the guys you're going to find in the waiver wire. It's kind of using the crystal ball, looking forward. Most of the time, if these guys have already had a big game, they're not there. But I like Devontae Adams a lot. I think that's very good advice. Let's do a quick hitter. Anybody sitting Ezekiel Elliott this week? Toughest matchup he's probably going to have all season. Green Bay's only going up 2.0 yards per carry. They're by far ahead of the league. The next closest team, 3.38. Green Bay giving up 2.0. Going to be a very tough matchup for Ezekiel Elliott. If you have an option, obviously if you don't have another starter, you're going to play Zeke if he's what you have. But if you have an option, do you sit Zeke this week? I'll start with you, Professor.
I don't think you sit him any week, even against that Minnesota defense. I think it's a must start no matter what.
Big Red.
Green Bay's got some soft matchups the first 4 weeks. To me, Zeke is an absolute start. I mean, you're going to see that yards per carry given up creep probably up to about 3.5 after this week.
Ooh, that's gonna be a lot of yards. We're gonna keep the average up that much, but we'll see. On to you, Artiste.
I think you have to play him. It goes back to what Big Red said. I mean, they definitely have had some easy matchups when it comes to run. Nobody that they played so far can really run the ball very well. However, I do think that he will slow down a little bit this week. I'm not saying not to play him. I think he'll still have a pretty good week because he is, Ezekiel Elliott having a hell of a year, and he's got the Dallas offensive line. He'll have a nice week, still decent, but he will slow down a little bit.
Canadian Bacon.
I'm with the other side of the panel. I don't think it's even a question. You play him. The odds of you having someone worth starting over him is about 0. I mean, if you lucked out and drafted 2 running backs early and then somehow grabbed Jordan Howard on a waiver wire and you're loaded at running back, then maybe you don't play him. Other than that, I don't see a situation where anybody could have options better than Zeke this week.
Yeah, on my last point, I think that if you don't have anybody else, you got to play your studs all the time. I think this is the worst matchup of the year for Ezekiel Elliott. I think that if you have somebody else, I think he's going to underwhelm this week. I think if you have somebody else, you throw him in there. If you have 2 other capable running backs, this is the week, probably the only week, you sit Ezekiel Elliott. We'll see after the week, and I might be eating crow next week when Zeke goes for 3 touchdowns. But I think he underwhelms this week. Artis, your pick against the spread.
I like me some Washington Redskins. Sounds racist, I suppose, but if they're not going to change their name, I'm going to keep saying it, Redskins. But I like them at home getting 3 points.
The Artis, politically correct.
Sure.
I like it.
Right? Home against Philly. I think Philly is not as good as they seem. They started off 3-0, but they come into Detroit and they lose. I just don't think they're that good, and I think Washington's a little bit better than people give them credit for. They won their division last year. They're getting points, 3 points at home. Yeah, I like me some Washington.
Yeah, I think that, excuse me, we can all agree when you lose to Detroit, doesn't matter who you are, that's a step in the wrong direction. Canadian Bacon, finish this up. Picks against the spread.
It's simply because Cousins is a Sparty. We'll put that out there.
Perhaps.
But I like Philly in that game, but I'll go the other way. I like Atlanta, plus 6.5 on the road at Seattle. Never been sold on Seattle's offense all season. I think I've said it enough times on the show. Don't think they're going to cover a touchdown. Atlanta at this point, I think, can score enough to keep it within that 6.5. Might not win the game, but I think they cover for you.
Yeah, Atlanta's offense has been really incredible. Any of those guys on your fantasy team doing very well for you. And I agree with you on the Artiste. It is Cousins. His love for Washington goes back to the Sparties, which is all a lost cause. But I like the Redskins this week.
So Cousins played for Michigan State is what you're talking
Somebody told me that awful rumor, but
right.
But it does make sense given his NFL career with the Redskins. Very pedestrian. Let's move on. Holly, what's next?
Takeaways.
Takeaways. I'm going to start with you, Professor. Your takeaways, week 6.
Julio Jones, he kind of came back to earth after his 300-yard performance, 2 receptions, 29 yards. I think he's going to have another tough week. He's going facing Seattle, good against the pass. I think if you have the guts, you might want to think about sitting him. Tom Brady, as we mentioned previously, he is back, showed very small signs of rust. He did torch a bad Cleveland team. But now he gets to go home this week, and you finally get to see the reemergence of Gronkowski. People have been waiting for him all year, and I think he's finally back, and I think he's going to have a great time moving forward. Ezekiel Elliott, another guy we touched on. Great offensive line. He's looked fantastic. And I think that team is just going to get better. I think that combination of Ezekiel and that offensive line, I think we're going to see even better things to come. And the last thing I just wanted to add was Jim Bob Cooter.
Nicely done. No hesitation there. That was like a second and a half, I believe, between Jim Bob Kidder and Artiste.
Best of the season.
Yeah,
so far.
we're finally starting to get that down. I agree on everything you said, Professor. Julio Jones used last week as a decoy. I think it happens again this week. I'm not that high on him again. He's also questionable. Who knows if he'll even. I think he will suit up this week. But he's been used as a decoy. It's been very frustrating for fantasy owners. After the 300-yard game, everybody was expecting these huge things. Last week, nothing. I think, again, this week, you're going to be disappointed with Julio. And with Gronkowski, Bennett had 3 touchdowns last week. That's not going to continue. Tom Brady loves Gronkowski. He's the stud there. 5 catches last week. He did go over 100 yards. I think Bennett stays involved in the offense, but I think the touchdowns swing the other way. I think you're going to see Gronkowski 9 or 10 touchdowns still, and just with the few games we have left. So Gronkowski, going to be a stud the rest of the way. Big Red, takeaways.
I had a little powwow with the Artiste beforehand. He'd like me to change the name of this from Dick in the Dirt to the Artiste Friday Nights. I can't figure out why, but you can probably infer what you need. So I'm going to give you a couple names. Love me some Alex Smith, the one against Oakland. Oakland giving up 300 yards, 2.5 touchdowns on average. Alex Smith, with the reemergence of Jamal Charles coming back, I think that this is a guy that you certainly can plug and play. He's going to be on your waiver wire. If you're in a tough bind, he's a guy to go get. And with him, Chris Conley, his wide receiver. I know they've got Jeremy Maclin out there. They've also got Kelsey. Those are the 2 target hounds. But Chris Conley's getting some red zone targets, and if you need a plug-and-play guy, I think he's a guy that's likely to get you a score this week, and that's what you're looking for, just kind of a lottery ticket. And lastly, I'm looking at running back as Duke Johnson. They've got a new quarterback out there, and when you have a new quarterback, you don't have a lot of reads. You're not in the flow of the NFL yet, so you're throwing a lot of outlet passes to your running back. You probably catch the 6 or 7 balls, 50 yards, turns one of those into a score, you're getting 11 points, and that's what you're hoping for. Again, these are not guys that you're hoping to play, but if you're up against it, much like the Artiste on Friday night, these are your guys to go get.
Yeah, I love the call of Duke Johnson. I love receivers like a Theo Riddick, especially if you're in a PPR league. Duke Johnson's going to score some points. New quarterback, he's going to want those safety passes, that safety valve. Offensive line is not good as well. He's going to need that safety valve, and Duke Johnson's going to fill in very admirably. I'm going to do mine before I kick on to the Artiste. My takeaway week 6, guys, go get Doug Martin. He's got a bye week in week 7. Charles Sims has been absolutely terrible. 3 yards per carry, not doing it. Jacquizz Rodgers is not the answer there. It's going to be the Doug Martin show going forward. And when he's healthy, I know the offense isn't great, but when he's healthy, Doug Martin is special. He comes back. I think you might be able to trade for him and get him right now for even a solid guy, but maybe somebody's willing to give him away at this point. Doug Martin hasn't done anything all season. Now's the time to grab him. His value is never going to be lower, and when he comes back from the bye, Doug Martin, I think, is going to crush the rest of the year. Artiste, your takeaway.
Well, I'd like to talk about Golden Tate just a little bit and just say what happened to Golden Tate.
Besides making you dress like a woman?
Right, besides making me dress like a woman.
We do have, I don't know if you guys know, but we have the dress challenge, and at some point, the Artiste is well on his way to being on the panel in a dress.
Yeah, and that's probably going to happen. Sadly, that's probably going to happen. I got to hold to my word, but we talked about earlier on, we talked about Marvin Jones versus Golden Tate. Who's going to be the number 1? Big Red said it was Marvin Jones. I said it'd be Golden Tate. He's clearly right. It was Marvin Jones, not Golden Tate. But beyond that, what happened to Golden Tate? We're talking about a guy who last year they had a guy in Detroit. His name was Calvin Johnson. I don't know if you've heard of him or not. Okay, he's a pretty good number 1.
Named after the Transformer?
I believe it was
that
Megatron.
Calvin Johnson?
I believe so.
All right, I just want to make sure it was
that
that Calvin
checked,
Johnson.
He was pretty fucking good. Okay, he was pretty fucking good, and so now Marvin Jones comes in.
Is this
and
a rant?
Tate, yes, permission to rant.
Rant granted.
Rant. So explain this to me. So So he comes in. I understand. Great receiver, Marvin Jones, phenomenal. Okay, but I'm gonna go out on a limb and say Calvin Jones might be better, or Calvin Johnson. You know what I mean? And so he comes in, and all of a sudden, Golden Tate's pretty damn good in the last couple of years with Calvin Johnson there. He's a pretty good fantasy player for your team. But now all of a sudden Marvin Jones comes in, and now Golden Tate is junk. You can't even play him. He's not even a start in your team as like a number 2. Explain, maybe Jim Bob Cooter, whatever his name is. He should pull his head out of his ass.
Here, I'll do that. I'll do that for
Hey,
you.
you're gonna help me out because
I'll do that for you. I'll take your role in that.
I can't do both. Are you serious? Give the guy the goddamn ball.
Yeah, I think I think we were all surprised that Golden Tate has had such a fall off. Busy backfield. They brought on Anquan Bolden, Marvin Jones. Everybody thought Golden Tate was going to be the guy. Marvin Jones has been incredible. Second in fantasy points through 5 games. First in yards. This week, guys, he goes against cornerback Troy Hill. Troy Hill is the worst graded cornerback against fantasy players this season. The Rams, not a bad defense. Troy Hill, a bad corner. And this week, he matches up against Marvin Jones. Marvin Jones has a big week this week. If he's on your team, you got to be feeling good about it. Canadian Bacon, takeaways.
All right, time to look at your team. If you're 1-4 at this point, the waiver wire probably isn't saving your season. At this point, you need to go make a trade, get creative, get risky, make a big deal. Some guys that I think that are out there that you might be able to snag for cheap. Corey Coleman, guy who had a couple big weeks first of the part of the season, breaks his hand in practice, has missed a few weeks, due back in 1 to 2 weeks. Now's the time to go get him. Guys are like, maybe don't realize what they have in him, maybe not up on him, maybe willing to move him for a flex guy and where you can get a wide receiver too cheap. Secondly, Eric Decker may or may not be done for the season. If you have him on your roster, now's the time to move him. Don't take the risk that he's out the season. If you can get anything back for him, now's the time to do it before the injury report comes out and says they're shutting him down. Thirdly, I like to just poke the host, Tevin Coleman. Huge week last week.
See how he does. Canadian Bacon.
Poke
check.
Yeah, exact. Thank you. The argument reigns on between Freeman and Coleman. I'll take Coleman in the 8th versus Freeman in the 2nd. Get the same production, but who am I?
I'm going to leave it alone that he wants to poke me. I get the sexiness, but right. Canadian Bacon wants to poke me.
He's a good-looking guy. He's a good-looking guy.
No, you know what? Quincy Enunwa with the Jets, I've heard that Eric Decker is out for the season with the shoulder. He's going to take a huge step forward, I think. Fitzpatrick is still terrible. I think you have to have lukewarm expectations. But Enunwa definitely takes a step forward with Decker out for the season. And I do believe he's out for the season. The last report I read right before we taped said he was gone. So Enunwa takes a huge step forward. I like it. So for this week, guys, thanks for tuning in. We were happy to have you. I did want to say about the waiver wire. This show, a lot is about the waiver wire. We're going to teach you guys to grab before they go off. If they go off 1 week, they're already going to be gone. They're going to climb up. We're going to get you those guys that go early. I mean, that's what we're doing. That's the research there to help you grab guys. Waiver wire is still important. Trades are good, but you have to have the other guy's permission to grab their player. Waiver wire, you can build it just through our knowledge, our expertise, and you're following what we want to do and grab those guys. So, for the professor, Big Red, the Doc, Artiste, Canadian Bacon, and our beverage connoisseur, Holly. Guys, thanks for tuning in this week.